spirituality is being in a constant state of receiving help. You follow what I'm saying? We're in a constant state of receiving help. That is the point of a spiritual solution, is to have this resource that we call God flowing through us by being close, by maintaining this contact, and then we get prayer and meditation to further this contact. Helping others is one of the greatest ways of maintaining this. And when in this condition, problems do not exist. Now, I know it sounds like a theory, but I'm sure everybody's had glimpses of that condition when you're just there and in this very moment, and there's no such thing as a problem. There is just now. That's all there is. There is just now and a desire to pass this on to others. So what happens? Well, what happens is we're in a battle with ourselves because part of us does not live in the spiritual world. Part of us lives in the material world. Matter of fact, if you go to 7 meetings a week, you're only in the spiritual world 7 hours a week. And we're watching TV 321 hours a week. And we're getting an entirely different message over there. They're going, what's that? Position of neutrality. Hey, you're just dreaming, pal. This is what the reality is. If you don't have a Buick, you ain't got a chance of becoming spiritual. And if you're insecure, you need Adidas. And if you can't do this, you need Viagra. And if you can't do this, you need that. And so, the whole economy would collapse if we all relied on our higher power to make us happy. So in order to save the country, we will become unspiritual. So what I'm trying to describe is the struggle that now goes on to stay there. And so the more things that happen to help us with problems and cause us to not have to rely on God, the more damage is being done to our spiritual program. And the more we become self-sufficient, the more we block God out of our lives. And so as it feels like I'm being successful, I am on this world, but over here I just pushed God further away. So what I'm leading up to is, if we were following the program precisely as it was written, discussion meetings would be incredibly boring. Now, why would discussion meetings be incredibly boring? Because they would sound like this. Joe, why don't you comment on how your life is going today? Well, I was in an accident yesterday and lost my arm, and went to the doctor, and they think they're going to maybe be able to fix it. But I got home, and I sat down, and I prayed to my higher power for guidance and the power to accept this, and I'm fine. Thank you. Well, Mary, what about you? Well, I found out last night my husband's leaving me for his secretary and probably going to be broke, and I'm not sure how I'm going to find my way out of this. But I sat down and prayed to my higher power, and he gave me guidance. I can see clearly the direction I have to go. He also gave me the power to get through this, so I'm fine. Well, what about you? What about you? No matter what was going on, these people are giving us one solution. Pretty boring, huh? Thank God we've been saved from that. And you can safely sit in almost any discussion meeting and hear nothing but solutions that don't involve God. And I'm guilty of doing it too. Well, what I told myself was, I'm going to have to show a little more tolerance for my boss. Because the program taught me that I've got to be patient, and I've got to be more tolerant, and I've got to be beep, 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 beep. That's just me, no God. And maybe I become a little better at being patient on my own. Okay, now I've blocked God out further. You see what I'm talking about? Even as it appears that I'm making progress, I'm not. My own progress is making me less dependent on a higher power. Isn't that a paradox? You see what I'm saying? Anything I accomplish on my own may go well in this world and in one set of evaluating myself, but over here it's working against me. And so what is the message? That's what I'm saying. We got to go back and look at this. The message is to rely totally on my higher power. Look at the 11th step, at the end of the 11th step. Praying only for knowledge of his will for him and the power to carry that out. Knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. That's it. So I came up with these. These are just things to help explain it to me. Here's what I think God's will for me is. I think God's will for me is this. God would like to be involved intimately in every problem and decision that I face in order to give me the guidance, the intuitive answer, so that if I follow it, I will be happy, joyous, and free, and the power to carry it out. That's what I think he would like to do for me. Now here's the problem, as I see it. He's very stingy with this help. I rarely get any of that. You know why? He put a condition on it. I have to ask for it. Now, wasn't that awful of him? Because he knows that I rarely ask. And since I rarely ask, because I enjoy doing it on my own, I rarely get helped of that nature. And when I rarely get helped, my ego notices that I rarely get help, and it calls me aside. It says, Sandy, I understand part of you is involved in a spiritual program. Yes? And you're going to give up self-sufficiency and totally rely on, oh yes, that's what I'm doing. I'm moving over there. Well, God only helped you twice last month. Are you sure you want to get involved? I said, you know, that's a good point. Maybe I should save a little self-sufficiency in case he's too busy to do it. And this is what is going on as I'm trying to move in this direction. Part of me is trying to pull me back. And Bill writes about that in the 6th step in the 12 and 12 when he says, this is the riddle of our existence. That there's a knock on the door. You know, the book God Calling, every time I see the book God Calling, there's a painting in a church that I go to, and it shows God, or the God of that church, standing at the door, knocking with the beard and the long hair, and you know who it is, and he's knocking. Whatever your vision of a higher power is not, and you're the one, you're inside. So I'm picturing me inside, okay? And there's the knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. I go, who's there? God. God? Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. You wanted me to take over your whole life. You wanted me, you know, praying only for knowledge. Well, I'm here. I'm yours. This is it. I'm here. Wow. How do I know it's you? Well, what do you want? What do you want me to do? Want me to do some miracle? Here. I'll bring your mother back to life. She's sitting there right talking to you. Hi, son. Yeah, that's God. Oh, really? Here, I'll have an elephant appear in your living room, walk around a little while. Okay, that's it. Now, here we are. You would think we would run to the door and just yank it open. You think we're yanking? Are you yanking? What are you doing? You're thinking. Whoa. Whoa. That would be like turning my entire will and life over to the care of God. This is the moment, all over to him. Who will I be? I'll be the hole in the donut. Remember that? When will I be in charge of anything? This could be the end of me as a person. That's the ego. That would be the end of me as a separate identity from God. What is causing my anxiety? Separation from my higher power. And there I am. I want to maintain it. I want to maintain it. I still haven't opened the door. Finally, I'm rescued by my ego. It says, God, I know this is going to sound crazy. And it may even sound ungrateful. I'm in the middle of the last episode of The Sopranos. Is there any way you could come back? Hello? Hello? Now I go to the door. There's no one there. That was just a joke. He wasn't there. I know he wasn't there. Think that could happen? Happens all the time. It happens all the time. And we have to accept that this is why it's so hard. Is that what we really want, we won't let happen. And so that's why we need each other, and we need people who are further along the spiritual path to help us get to where they are. You follow what I'm talking about? In other words, this is not a theory. This is really true. This is the point of the whole spiritual journey, is to get closer and closer. That means more and more dependent on this higher power. And so in the sixth step, Bill calls this the riddle of our existence. Go look in the 12 and 12, you'll see the words, the riddle of our existence. Well, what is that? It is our struggle to maintain our misery. To maintain it. It is a lot of spiritual writers write, the hardest thing for mankind to let go of is its suffering. It's who I am. That's what I... And so he writes that the answer may only be in the mind of God, but he has some ideas. And one of the problems is that our character defects give us pleasure. And that the step has a problem in it. The step's problem is it's too extreme. Spiritual help is too extreme. Have you noticed that God didn't make us social drinkers? He won't let us have any alcohol at all. The solution to alcoholism is zero alcohol. None. And for an alcoholic, that's too extreme. But then we find out that if we work these steps, we are given a perfect release from alcoholism. The problem doesn't exist anymore. We're placed in a position of neutrality, and the biggest problem we've ever had is gone. Been lifted out. Doesn't even exist as long as we maintain our connection with this society and with the spiritual awakening that we had. Why don't we do that with all our other character defects? Why are they still lurking around? Why am I still greedy and lustful and envy? And why do I gossip? And why do I keep doing? What is wrong? And that is what we need to always be working on. That would be a very constructive goal and type of meetings to have, instead of, what do you do if your boss doesn't like your memo? I mean, I'm just saying this might be a path to spend more time on. So in other words, this area, now I've thought a lot about it, and so have a lot of other people, and it's fun to talk about. And the more we talk about it, the more progress we can actually make in that area. And Bill was right. We like our character defects. Who doesn't like to gossip? It's fun. And I remember going, Dr. Bob, that's the worst, that's going to hurt AA. Gossiping, gossiping. So you think about it. Wouldn't that be wonderful to just have it lifted out of you like drinking was? Yes, it would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? Yeah, most of it. I'd like most of it. Where did that come from? Well, I'd like to stop originating gossip, because that is very, very bad. But if I'm simply relaying something that's just going by, I'm just like a telephone pole. So I would like God to remove all initiating of gossip. That's not what it said. It didn't say that at all. And besides, God won't do that. You want to get rid of it? It's going to be all gone. Well, let's move on to the next character defect, because I'm not entirely willing to have all of that go. Okay, how about lust? Yeah, lust. Gone, zero, none, gone. You're sitting there lust-free. Lust-free? What would that be? Lust-free? Sounds like you're dead. Lust-free? Do you see? And so we could go through all of these with Greek, with all of this, so you can see our struggle in this spiritual program is how to move in the direction of perfection and to never stop. And so I think Tom described it. The more comfortable and the more other bodies, or the more the outside world solves our problems for us, the less desperate we are, and the more we're liable to settle for mediocrity. And I think that's what we're describing. It's a sufficient program. It's there. There's meetings. There's this. But where's the enthusiasm? Where's the excitement? Where's the ball of fire that just ignites anybody who comes near you? We have to ignite it again. And we need igniters. And you can become an igniter. And so, but we need to know what that message is so that it ignites. If you haven't been ignited yet, then you haven't sought enough. God could and would if he were sought. So we become seekers, and we just go, I've been sober 15 years. I don't know if I've had that peak experience. I'm going to find somebody who has had that, and I'm going to go have it happen to me so that that's what I'm passing on. That makes sense? Makes sense to me. It means we can't settle. See, here, I'm over here trying to make the message more powerful, and Tom's trying to show how service can be made more powerful and more effective. And then the two combined will have us right where we want to be, where that same excitement, because a spiritual awakening is an incredibly wonderful thing. It is why we're alive. So I don't know if I've made any sense about trying to take the message part of it and show how the message could suddenly become very dull in a way. Yeah, oh, you're new. Oh, great, you're going to love it. We eat lunch here, and we're over here, and we're over there, and then we go to a dance. So you're going to love it in here. You're going to love it in here. And it could be a semi-wonderful life. We might even keep people sober till they die, and we would have cheated them out of the very point of getting sober, the spiritual connection with their Creator. So let's look at these things as blessings and liabilities at the same time. These extra help that come from wherever, and get back to the primary purpose, which is to guide someone into contact with their own Creator. Thank you.
I'm sure I speak for all of us for thanking both Tom and Sandy for just a wonderful, wonderful day together. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Now, I promise the word promptly won't come out of my mouth on this particular occasion. So let's just try our very best. If we could, hopefully make it back in about 15 minutes or so.
15,
And by,
that's better.
yeah,
15.
by my watch, that'd be about quarter till. Thank you all. And then we'll do a Q&A session for those who would like to participate. My name is Jeff, and I am an alcoholic.
Hi.
Jeff.
We're going to wrap up today's session of our workshop with a question and answer period for Sandy or Tom or both, or just any questions you may want to throw out and see who fields it. What we'd like to ask you is we have a microphone set up here just about halfway down the aisle. So if you would like to ask a question, if we could just have you gather in that general area. It looks like there may be enough seats for people to sit in if they'd like to wait, if that's more comfortable. And we will just go as long as time permits and as many questions as there are. I will try and moderate, but certainly we'll let Sandy and Tom take the lead on that. And I think we have someone to actually start us off. Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen Myers.
Hi, Karen.
I have a question for Sandy. I was just curious, in addition to AA-approved literature, has there been any, what I would call kind of outside spiritual literature that you have found useful, or any outside spiritual activities that you have found useful in your journey?
Well, my answer is yes, but I'd rather tell you about them afterwards, specific authors or specific anything, rather than put it on the tape. But I will reference the Big Book and the 12 and 12. Suggest that we can talk to ministers and rabbis, and libraries are filled with books. And so a search is exactly that, a constant seeking. But I want to make the point that it is not in order to find an alternative to Alcoholics Anonymous, but rather how to make a deeper effort in steps 11 and 12. And for that, we're encouraged. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a workshop down in Tampa on Sunday on taking personal responsibility for your own spiritual growth. Coming up on that, in other words, as we start, and we always say it's a we program, then all of a sudden you go, well, here I am doing something on my own, I must be doing it wrong. But we're not doing it on our own. We go and we get guidance in an area, and then we can talk to our sponsor about it. With God, I just had this wonderful thing. And there's a sentence, I think it's in the 12 and 12. People of very high spiritual development always insist on checking with others the guidance they feel they got from God, so that as we're doing this, we come back and go, guess what, sponsor? I just had this idea that just came to me from God. I ought to leave my family and go to Guatemala. I don't think that came from God. I think let's check lust. And we'll get some feedback. But you see what I'm saying? Yes, lots of other things.
Please.
My name is Julia Goodman, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Julia.
Tom, I want to ask you a question that we talked a little bit about yesterday. First, I got to just give you guys some feedback. This has been some of the most powerful message for me to receive that I've heard in AA in probably 10 years. Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful.
I am currently serving as alternate DCM for District 40 in Northern Illinois area, and I plan to stand for the DCM position at our district elections next month. And if that occurs, then I'm going to be looking at trying to help 4 service committees in the district get jump-started: PI, CPC, corrections, and treatment. Corrections has gotten going a little. I'm probably more comfortable there because of my background. But as I look at PI, CPC, and treatment, these committees really have not been functioning at all effectively in my district. So my question to you is if you were in my shoes and you ended up being DCM with 3 committees that were not active, how would you get it started?
It's,
Simple but not easy.
I've never guessed.
I'd rather talk about outside literature or that. I read a lot of outside stuff too, and I'm just amazed how many of those folks have captured our AA philosophy and what they do. And I think it's a great question to ponder a little bit. And let me just offer this, Julia. I think one of the mistakes we often make is that we develop a program and then try to fit it in somewhere, which I think is 180 degrees off. You know? And the best way to organize is to organize around a way to solve a problem. You know, organize that the committee exists to get a job done. And so it's easier to tackle a project, and then all you do is say, how do we need to organize to get this done? And so it'll take care of shaping the deal. And I say that for one other reason, that in doing service committees, and what I find is that there is at least as much, if not more, value in the preparation to do the project than there is in the project itself. There's something really, really importantly effective about this thing of getting the message ready to go. And what happens is it really energizes the committee. So 2 things. One would be to focus on the problem you want to solve, organize, get it done, and then you got a committee there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kitty, visiting from Columbus, Ohio, alcoholic from Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, Kitty. Welcome.
Flew in for this workshop. Sandy and Tom, thanks so much. I'm really learning a lot. My head is spinning, so hopefully I get this question out of it. I love working with newcomers. It's just such a treat. And I learned something today. One of the many things is the business of that I am resistant to treatment, and I don't know what to do. I'm having a very hard time carrying the message. The desperation isn't there because somebody's fixing the meals and they already are working a program, so they don't really depend upon AA. The sponsorship relationship is the same, and I don't know how to do this. We had a treatment facility move in my neighborhood. I thought, yippee, you know, they're right in my backyard, and golly, it's just not working well for me. And there's a lot of guidelines, and I need to fit into their program in order to carry the AA message, and I just feel like I'm complying with their rules in order for me to carry the message. And so, but one thing I've learned today is that it's my responsibility that no matter how the alcoholic ends up in the meeting, that I just need to do my best. So I'll throw that out there. I don't know if it's a question, but we were talking about raising the bottom that another alcoholic hits, but I don't know what the missing link is, and maybe you can give me a suggestion. Glad to be here, thanks.
With my hearing deficit, I may not have caught it accurately, but I think you're talking about how to carry the message effectively in an environment that may not be supportive of what you're doing, that may be congruent with what you're doing. I would just offer this, that I mentioned earlier that about designing an effort to fit the environment where it's going. What I mean by that is a lot of times when we're working with an agency or a facility, we get trapped into the notion that we have no influence on what they're doing and are sort of helpless to deal with that thing. In fact, Julia has a copy of it. There's a little 4-step process that we've worked out. Now here you're talking about carrying a message personally. But if you want to broaden that and talk about how you get a program to work effectively in a place, and I think the same principle would be there. Well, let me take the simple one first with a personal thing. When I go into a facility, all I want to know is who's in there, But more particularly, I want to know what my function is. And my function when I go in there is to be a good example of Alcoholics Anonymous and carry an effective message to whoever's listening. And so I don't get caught up in a lot of details about that, unless there's some bizarre thing out of whack. So the key to me is getting real steady and realistic about what I'm doing. I want to go in there and do what's right the best I know how. And so I just ask God before I go in to help me do just that. And when I clear out all the other stuff and get down to the essence of what I'm about, I don't care where it is. I can carry the message in hell if I get ready to go. And so that, from an individual standpoint, I certainly do that. But I'd like to just expand that just a bit, because a lot of times we really do just sort of throw programs in without a lot of thought to what they do and where they're going to do it and how they're going to do it. It's almost like throwing mud on the wall to see what sticks. And so I made up my mind a long time ago, I will never develop another program in any facility, I don't care what kind it is, without having a substantial meeting with the senior manager of that facility. Not the second banana or the third shift banana. It's going to be the top person in that facility if we're setting up a new program. And the purpose of that meeting is to do one thing. That's to basically learn what that facility is, how they function, how they operate, what kind of latitude you got to do a program in there, if they have an interest in a program. One-sided meeting where you learn about the facility. And then the second step is to meet with the people who are going to do the service and take a look at the facts of that place and say, what kind of program can we fit in? What kind of a program can we develop to fit in what they've told us? The third thing is to write that up and give it to the senior person, and they'll either endorse it by signing it, or if they've got some suggestion for change, which they rarely do. And then the fourth one is to put the program in place. Now that sounds like less than what we're used to. Usually what we do is say, we want to have a meeting and say, okay, we'll do it Tuesday night, let's get it on. And then you spend the rest of the time pointing fingers about whose fault it is that it's not working. And so what I'm talking about is a way we make a mistake by saying it's their facility. Take like corrections, for example, where we do a lot of this. Saying it's their facility, well, it's not their facility. It's a public facility, and we're not street corner thugs. We're responsible citizens trying to offer a service. And so I think there's a very, very respectful platform that we have to operate from. So we don't want to run that facility, but we don't want to just roll over for it. And so when we put a plan together, it's what we think will work in that environment. See, the facility's in charge of running the facility. We're in charge of Alcoholics Anonymous. Our principles laid out in traditions are just as important as their rules and regulations or laws. And so I think there's a strong negotiating point that we often ignore. And then we pay the price by confusion and all this kind of stuff. So as an individual, I want to get real prepared to go in and deliver a clear message and get out as an individual. But if I'm going to try to launch a program, then I want to get into some serious negotiation about setting it up in a way that's got a good chance to succeed. Julia just asked a question, has got a copy of that little form, and it's a very simple thing. It's call it a 4-step process, and it lays it out in pretty clear terms. Probably gave you a lot more answer than you wanted, but it's, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Jerry Malcolm.
Hi, Jerry.
First off, thank you. This is phenomenal to see you guys. One thing I haven't been around the program a long time, but I do a lot of things, and the one thing I noticed a lot that I kind of picked up is that 3 words are in the program now, which can't slow it down. It's take your time. Because what I've noticed is that when the people come in the program and they kind of work the steps fairly quickly, they tend to get it a little faster, and it tends to occupy their brain when they're first there and it's running like crazy. That's the time to get those first 2, whatever, the 4-step done. can you just discuss a little bit just the difference between the way it used to be and the way it is now, as far as how you guys used to run through? Because the treatment centers and all that, it's all take your time. And I think what happened is a lot of people did take their time, and as it went farther, that's the way they thought the next guy should do it. And now, I'll see people 3 years before they even think about fourth and fifth steps, in a lot of pain.
You want me to take that? Okay. Well, I look at how long it took Dr. Bob to do his ninth step, and he'd been sober, God, I think around 5 hours. And I think in the 12 and 12 it said, as far as making amends, we don't want to rush into it. And a lot of people remember that sentence. You know what the next sentence is? We might want to wait several weeks or longer. Several weeks. Okay, so obviously I believe in moving as long as fast as the person can take. And when I sponsor people, it is basically meeting at my house at the time that I said, and we meet for an hour to an hour and a half, and we go through one step each week, with the exception of 4, that could take a little bit longer, and 8, and getting 9 organized as to what approach to take on each amend. But I would say the whole thing is 15, 16 weeks, and then it's maintaining, and it is calling with a specific situation so that I can show him another way of looking at it. That is generally all that's required, is that you get stuck and disturbed by something because in your disturbance it's impossible to see it spiritually. And when you see it, and then you just go, oh yeah, and then it just boils down to, I either need to forgive somebody or make an amend. That's the end. There's not anything else to do. You follow what I'm saying? It just, but that's my pace. I don't know how fast you go through.
Let me just underline a couple of things Sandy said. In fact, I'm starting a group on Tuesday coming. And in this one, by just luck of the draw, we are anticipating 16 weeks. And in that one, we're going to do a very focused thing on steps. There are a lot of ways to take people through the program. And because of my travel schedule, I'm never around enough to reliably work one-on-one. And so I've had to opt for going to group. And so I've done a lot of long-term big book workshops. The big thing is getting folk through the program. If I had the luxury of time, I would no longer do it one-on-one, because I think there's an extra value in the group experience. And I like that group experience because that's where we're going to spend the rest of our lives, is in groups. And so I like to get folks sort of conditioned to the fact that the group is a powerful resource. You know, so I lean in that direction. And so to me, the time to take a step is when you get to it, you know, no matter what it is. I'm always a little bit uncomfortable with those kind of production line things that'll often happen in treatment, where it's just sort of a scripted kind of a quick deal. Sometimes it's effective, but often you have to go back and redo it. So if I'm going to err, I had rather err on the side of too quickly than too slowly, because you can always go back and steady your work. And so I like to just move on, and Dr. Bob's style is fine with me. Yeah, that's a good question.
Very good question.
Yeah.
I'm Betty Brandon, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Betty.
You know, I suddenly feel very shy about asking this, but you know, Sandy, you were talking about the spirituality of the program. And for many, many years, probably 20 or so, I was always sent to a psychiatrist or a therapist. Okay? At the same time, time I'm working the steps, I was taught how to work the steps, thank God. I was taught to get on my knees, but I gave my power to this outside enterprise. So guess what? Now all the people that I get to sponsor are all on medication and seeing psychiatrists and therapists and all of this, and I try to emphasize the steps and how it has worked for me. And I don't know, I really feel powerless over this. Maybe God is, he says, well, honey, I gave you this, now what are you gonna do with it? I don't know, so I thought I'd mention this. I think it's a problem. I thought I was the only one that was being treated with medication for all those years. And I was told in 2001 that I would have to take the medication for the rest of my life. Well, guess what? I don't have to. So how do I don't know, and then I'm told, be careful, be careful. So.
Now, I want to get this. I heard two possible questions. One was about medication in general, but the one I heard also was that your initial experience in AA led you to behave this way, and now you've had a deeper insight, and so your advice now is better than it was earlier. What do you do about that? Was that a question too?
Well, I don't know how to carefully carry this message, because I'm told you have to not say don't take medication. So I don't. I say work the steps. But I wanted to hear comments from you, because I feel, both of you, or one of you, or whatever, because I feel this has been such a powerful workshop, and I need guidance on how am I supposed to do this. This is a spiritual program, and I finally understand that all I am is an alcoholic and I have a spiritual malady. Have I answered my own question or something?
No, I mean, if I got a broken arm, I go get it set. I don't pray that it sets itself. You know what I mean? So there's a role for medicine, and then there's a role for spirituality. But medication, I mean, here we can go back, and here's the old days was that in medical school they taught nothing about alcoholism, and as a result, in the 60s and 50s and maybe 70s, an AA member would go and say to some doctor that, geez, I feel a little anxious when I stand on top of the Empire State Building. And out would come the Valium or the Librium out of knee-jerk reaction, no understanding of alcoholism, and lots of AA members were getting burned. And so individual AA members started speaking out, stop taking that stuff, which is practicing medicine without a license. But it was understandable under the horrible conditions that were going on then. And then now we're getting where there are lots of doctors who are also recovered alcoholics who are very knowledgeable about medications. And that is a great source for people to go to. And if one of them says, this seems to be appropriate, I'm not going to get in the middle of that. That's where I am.
Yeah, I'll mention one thing that this really is a lively issue around the country, and it's one that's got a lot of importance, because if you get off base too much either way, you can do some huge damage. I've seen a number of suicides that were the result of fumbling around with trying to manage medication. And I tell you, as I was a prison administrator for a long time, and had enormous authority. But one authority I would never exercise would be to overrule a medical judgment, because that's suicide to do that, for me to do that. So it's a very heavy kind of an issue. We do get cases sometimes where somebody will get heavy-handed to start dictating things that, my personal notion is I won't get complicated with, but I'm hanging around with people in the medical world. I learned a term called the clinical imperative. And the clinical imperative simply means that you deal with the difficulty that's most disabling first. Stands to reason. If you got an abscessed tooth, you're not going to be talking about fixing your hair. You know, you're going to get your abscessed tooth taken care of. If you've got a disturbance where medication's required, sometimes that is the clinical imperative. And so what we have to do is yield to the most pressing need. And then when they get stabilized, then it can come to AA. But it's a very critical thing. On the average, you know, on just the average walking-in case, most people tend to get slapped with some diagnoses, which may or may not be for real, but they'll get into medication, and it really is a temporary thing. It ought to be a temporary thing. I'm a great believer in a guy from New York, an internist. I love him so much I can't think of his name, and he's prominent in dealing with people who do alcoholism work. And Stanley Getlow is his name.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Stanley Getlow. And he's a brilliant man. He says that he would not make a secondary diagnosis on an alcoholic till he'd been sober at least 2 years, because the false effects are that dramatic. And so a lot of times that's what we're dealing with. And so when I'm working with somebody personally, what I try to do is work with the person to get them to work with their doc to set a realistic gate that they can get off the stuff. And beyond that, I think we're in real jeopardy when we start going beyond that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's a very valid concern.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Manahal.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Thank you both for the workshop, and thank you, Jack. I have a question for Sandy. You were talking about how, and I'm sorry if I'm misquoting you, but you believe that God's will for you is to be involved in every aspect of your life and the details and stuff like that. And my question, I really want to believe that, and I can't, you know. And so I was wondering if you have any suggestions about, or maybe your experience and how you came to that, or how I would believe that, since I want to.
Yes. Because a lot of this is occurred with me after 20, 25 years of, you know, reading what the book clearly says and where I was. And so I'm going, well, how do I get from here to there? And I'm going to tell you, I covered it when I was talking. I decided to. There was never anything more than that. I just, on several different occasions, I just decided to try a day where I imagine myself communicating with my higher power about everything. All right, what should I be doing now? What should I, no. Was I getting answers, you know, like a voice or anything like that? No, I wasn't getting that, but what I was sure of was that I was closer to my intuitive nature than at any other time before that, which is the highest level of thinking that human beings are capable of, is to, you know, we intuitively know. You remember how sometimes you just go, I don't know why, but I just knew that this, and I just knew. So then I said, well, how could I be there more often? How could I be there more often? I think I'll decide to try and be there more often. Now, the problem is, part of me, anytime I move closer to my higher power, I threaten my ego. So I'm going to veto that. I've never had a decision to make a spiritual progress step without a backlash. later on. What are you doing that? Hey, man, that's dangerous in there. You know, you go turn it over. There's no one there to take it. What are you doing? You can't be out there. You better blah, blah, blah. And now, after all these years, I realize it's always going to be there. I decide that, and then there's going to be this thing where you're going to be in trouble. I'm going to, and then it goes away. And then it goes away. So basically, it's always been a decision, just like everything else is. How do you get to graduate school? You decide to go. The third step made a decision. And so a lot of times, because of my ego, I take back decisions. I got to make them again. I got to make them again. And so that's why outside literature sometimes inspires me. I read, oh yeah, look how hard this guy had to work. You read some of these guys, they had to struggle for a year to let go of something. I mean, you know, and then you go, oh, well, then I'm not weird. Okay, so I can, but it always ends up being a decision. Yep.
Hi, my name is Joy. Alcoholic.
Hi, Joy.
Just something while I was waiting in line, Tom. You said that you would prefer to work with your people as a group. Working with new, sober, alcohol women as a group doesn't work. We don't like each other. It doesn't work. My question is a CPC question. I came in the program, got kicked into the program by a supervisor. I'm a professional. I'm an RN. And she didn't want to see me lose my license, so she helped me detox for 3 days in a hotel room and told me to get my butt to AA. That's what I did. It took me a couple months, but I got there. I have had her ask me now that I'm a sober member in Alcoholics Anonymous for some years if I wouldn't help other people that she knows in the same way. I have a sponsor tell me, don't you dare, you're jeopardizing somebody else's situation, tell them to go to treatment. I don't know what the guidelines there, and there's also all these professional meetings for recovering nurses. I don't go to those. I go to Alcoholics Anonymous because I'm an alcoholic and I drank with everybody. I didn't drink exclusively with nurses. So I have difficulty dealing with these doctors, lawyers, and nurses who don't drink like I drank. And I was just wondering what your opinions are on those kind of things, because I would like to give back to that community, but not exclusively. And at the same time, I don't think me sobering somebody else up the way the supervisor helped me sober up, which worked for me, is my place to do. I don't know what the right answer is. If I could get away with that, I would love to, but I don't know if my ego would get away with it. So anything that you have on that, I appreciate. Thank you.
It's one thing about the program, it affords us as much privacy as we want, as much as we need. And there are some people in sensitive positions who simply have to be anonymous. You know, it's just the nature of their profession. And so that's an understandable thing. It's also it's a convenient hiding place too, you know, where you can avoid responsibilities by hiding out. Yeah, one of the things I heard Bill Wilson say one time was that he was talking about anonymity, and he said it was never intended to cause AA to be a furtive hiding place. That the function of AA is to restore us to our rightful place in the world. And so my experience has been that unless it's some remarkably sensitive place, there's rarely trouble if you've got well-established sobriety. It's I think of a thousand examples. Well, I'll give you one that's a kind of a ludicrous sounding thing, but I think it makes a point. I had a friend who was an attorney, and he was walking down the street one day, and he met a fellow attorney who was having a lot of trouble with booze. And so my buddy stopped the guy and chatted with him a minute and said, man, why don't you give it up and come on to AA? And the drunk attorney said, oh man, I couldn't do that. Man, if word got out about that, it would ruin me. And my buddy said, if word got out that I was not in AA, it would ruin me. And so, so most of the time, if there's not some inordinate demand for anonymity, most of us can do effective work without a lot of fanfare, without a lot of notoriety, and it's usually handled very well. Things have changed, some of them good. I'll give you an example of airline pilots. When when I first started encountering airline pilots in AA, those guys were as scared as any human could be, because if they got known as an alcoholic, I don't care if they recovered 20 years, they were fired immediately with no questions. And so I had a buddy, I didn't know what was wrong with him. I didn't know he was a pilot, and I didn't know what was wrong with him. I knew he was flinchy about something, but he didn't have a name. He had initials. His initials were CC.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, that's right.
see how anonymous he was? He was Sandy. But this guy and I were buddies, and one day I asked him, I said, "What is your name?" And he looked all around and he said, "CC." But don't tell anybody. Well, thank God those days are lifted, you know. And today we've got a lot more freedom with that. So I'm tap dancing around that because it's not a real forthright kind of way to do it. I tell you this, I'm about as anonymous as a train wreck. And if there has ever been one iota of injury, embarrassment, or anything else as a result of that, I don't know it. I don't know it. I'll give you one other example on that, because I think it is. Sometimes you grow up with this illusion of the need for anonymity and grossly exaggerated. For a lot of years when I was flying somewhere, people would ask me where I'm going. I'm really always going to AA stuff. Yep. And so people would ask me, and I would just sort of be evasive. I wouldn't lie. I'd just sort of avoid the truth. And so I'd say, "Oh, I'm going to Chicago. What for? Conference? What's it about?" I say, "Oh, it's about alcoholism." Well, this is not about alcoholism. It's part of the agenda, but it's about recovery. It's about new life. And one day I was flying somewhere, and I thought, why on earth do I do that? That's got nothing to do with anonymity. Absolutely nothing. What it has to do with is either pride or fear. Well, what's anonymous about a steel tube 35,000 feet in the air, for God's sake? And I said, "Man, that's dumb." And I said, "I ain't going to do that anymore." And from that point forward, if anybody wants to know where I'm going, they better be interested. I'll guarantee you they're going to know where I'm going. And they're going to know something. And the important thing is, not only have I never had an awkward situation, I have never had a single person that wasn't more than interested. Practically every one of them's got one in their tree. Every family's got one. I find some that they're the one. You know, I found runaway Al-Anons. It's amazing what happens, and when you just open up, you know, and that's what this program is about. It's about being able to be free, to be who I am, to just be open and natural and not furtive and guarded. And so, as much as humanly possible, you know, I hope you'll move in that direction, because that's where the liberation is. And I know you got to protect your flanks, but don't sacrifice the farm in the process. So they have all the best.
Thank you.
Do you
I'm Ken, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Ken.
I would imagine that there are a lot, or rather that there is a lot of profit to be had from other organizations, whether it be, say, treatment facilities or what have you. And what kind of conflicts have you run into with regards to AA over treatment facilities? You know, because what's more important, the bottom dollar or the welfare of an individual? You know, I hear so many people say they've been from one facility to another, to another, to another, and instead of getting caught in what some people call the revolving door of AA, they get caught in the revolving door of a treatment facility. Okay, what can we do to prevent them from even getting that far into the trap of a treatment facility? That's question number one. The other question is, what can we do within our own groups to keep people from getting caught in that trap? One thing my home group does, we have what's called couch duty. Okay.
call what?
Couch duty.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Where someone who's like real fresh has no place to stay, they'll stay at one person's house for a few days, and then someone else's house for a few days, and someone else's house for a few days, and we like work with alcoholics, you know. It appears to me that the treatment facilities take away that desperation of that one-on-one that you were talking about earlier, you know, with tapering off those who are like real bottom cases. So what can we do about that?
There's a fine line between what we can do and what we ought to do. The treatment facilities are an outside issue, and the conflict I have with them is zero, because I don't have any reason to have any conflict with them. They are an outside entity, and so I don't have any sort of a range war going with those folks. If I think what you guys are doing, it sounds a lot like the old-fashioned 12-step work we were doing. Yeah, I suspect that we're going to be doing more and more of that, because the advent of treatment is upon us, and it's getting increasingly difficult to find places for treatment that's affordable. And insurance companies are quitting paying, and so where there used to be treatment centers, there are now hot dog stands. So those who yearn for the good old days are going to get their prayers answered, because those days are coming back. So that's certainly one alternative. I personally don't hesitate to recommend somebody to a treatment center, but only, and my criteria is very simple. If they cannot stay sober for one day, I'll recommend treatment. But if they can stay sober for one day, that's what you need to get going in AA. And so I think there's a great place. Everybody doesn't need treatment. We went through a time when, I swear to God, I felt sorry for alcoholics. They could drink a half a pint, and I'm son of God, somebody'd capture them and have them in treatment. And I thought, boy, that is really, I mean, what a cruel thing to do to somebody. And he got started good, and somebody already got him captured. So I think you can overdo it. And so I think I'm lined up pretty solid with what you guys are doing. The reason I say it, be cautious about how far, when we get into trying to influence an outside entity, we're in the wrong ballpark. But with the drunk that we're working with, you know, whatever we can do to help him get the closest to the scene of the crime, the better. You know, I really like to see somebody be able to get sober the old-fashioned way when they can, but sometimes they can't. So anyway, I said enough about that, I think, but I commend you for what you guys are doing, for sure. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Matt. I'm powerless over alcohol.
Hi, Matt.
Yeah, Tom, I'm just wondering, I need some clarification on the fifth step of admitting God to ourselves and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. And, you know, when I was 5 years old, just a little boy, I got the concept of God, my father, who was never there for me, and I didn't trust. So, you know, I kind of separate, I was separate, I thought I was a rotten kid at 5 years old, and then God wasn't available to me. So is that separation, me separating myself and becoming self-reliant, the exact nature of my wrongs, or I'm not exactly sure what it means when they say that, the exact nature of our wrongs. In the fifth step.
The definition of exact nature of our wrongs, but what, I didn't get the childhood thing. What did that have to do with that?
Well, just like, I'm thinking that, you know, my alcoholism, you know, the core of my disease is, you know, loneliness and low self-esteem. And I just feeling that way, feeling that like God wasn't available to me because I was bad. You know, where a 5-year-old kid comes up with that, I don't know. But, you know, I'm just trying to figure out, you know, I want to carry this message, and when I sponsor people, and if I ever, you know, hear somebody's fifth step, you know, I wanted to be able to explain to them, you know, what is the exact nature of our wrongs? Is everybody, are all of our, you know, the exact nature, is it the same for everybody, or is it different for different people?
Oh, okay. Well, I think that in the fourth step, we're making a list of our character defects, and that list is the same as in the fifth step. In other words, it's what we have written down as in our inventory, and it's just another way of saying it, the exact nature of our wrongs. What it allows in the fifth step is, I have a tendency to do this, and I did it 1,000 times. Here's number one, here's number two, here's number three, here's number four. I don't have to go through all 1,000. I have covered the nature of it. You follow what I'm saying?
You mean the defect that it, no, I don't, Paul. You mean, so the exact nature is you cover like the defect of, whatever you're talking about?
It's what we went over in the fourth step.
Okay.
Okay? In other words, I'm going to share that with my higher power and with another person, generally my sponsor. And so whatever I have listed is what I'm sharing. Does that make any sense to you?
No, I guess I'm looking for like the concrete, the exact nature. Like, what is the exact nature of our wrongs, or the exact nature of, how our character defects flow out of us?
Well, I mean, if I lied to someone, the exact nature is the lie.
Okay. So it's the concrete act?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's exactly what I suppose we're trying to find more in there than there is. Does that make sense to you?
Let me add one other thing that might be an example that, in the inventory, there's surprising things in there. One of the areas that I found had to do with my relationship with my mother. And she was a wonderful lady, a wonderful, loving person. She just overdid it. And so I grew up in a family that was essentially male absent, female dominant. And so when I started looking at the nature of that relationship, it had a mixture of both feelings I had toward her, that was part of the nature of the wrong. The other was that what I deprived her of. You see what I'm talking about? That in one sense, I had a lot of anger toward her, and I felt a lot of guilt and fear that grew up in that matriarchal society. On the other side, what I deprived her of was a son. Yeah. Now she knew she had one somewhere, but most of the time she didn't even know where I was. And so I deprived her probably, excuse me, nothing more important to a mother than her child. And so for most of my life, she didn't know whether I was living or dead or present or anything. And so when you look at the nature of the wrong, that's what starts to come out, was that there was a real damage to relationship there. And the wrong sort of generalized into a general ability to have relationships with people. Kind of revealing that as I started dealing with that, I saw that fundamental to my inability to have relationships went back to that. And so the importance of getting down to the nature of the wrongs is that that's where the freedom comes from. And so just, going to that kind of detail, it helps me to get a real handle on what I'm doing. It also sets up the amends process very neatly, too.
Yeah, I guess when I do fourth and fifth step, I'm actually helping on the fourth. And it's just a technique I developed in the last 15 years. Rather than let somebody complete it all and bring it, we just start and I go, let's just talk about this. Well, I got this down, and then I flesh it out and say, well, do you see that this implication and that implication? And I guess that really is the exact nature, is the ability to see the third dimension of it. Yeah. I just never connected it with those words. I'm glad Tom did today.
Hi, Beth.
Thanks, Jeff, for your service, and thank you so much.
Pull it down a little bit.
My name is Beth. Thanks, Jeff, for your service, and thank you so much. Sandy, I think I heard a tape of yours. Are you
No. Well, I could have been lying that day.
You bet.
My other question was, if you had, either one of you had a personal experience with Dr. Bob or Bill, and if you could just share a story about
What?
that.
About what?
Your a personal interaction with Bill or Dr. Bob, just like a little story about.
No, every year my friend Hal Marley would say to me, you want to go to the Bill Wilson dinner with me? And I would say, I don't have enough money. And it was just from Washington to New York. And after about 6 years, he said, you know, he's not going to live forever, and you're going to regret that you never met him. Well, he was right, because in 1971, he died, and what would I give to be able to say I shook his hand or had a picture of me and Bill? But I didn't meet, and obviously I didn't meet Dr. Bob. He died in 1950.
Now, I did have the privilege. I did. I went to my first international convention in Toronto in '65. And my primary motivation, I mean, I was broke, man. I'm just out of jail. I couldn't afford it. But my primary motivation was that I thought that would be my last chance to see Bill. And for some reason, I wanted to see him. You know, I didn't want to tell him anything. I didn't want to press on him or anything. I just wanted to see him, make sure he's there, you know. And so I went up, and of course I saw him a lot. He was like the Energizer Bunny. He was just all over the place. And then one day we had a traditions meeting, and you can always count on a skinny crowd. And so there's my chance. I went in. There was about probably 35 of us in a room, and so I had a chance to sit down and listen to Bill. We weren't fishing buddies. We were just people in a meeting. But to hear our founder articulate about the program, the thing I mentioned about anonymity a little earlier, I listened to him tell that. I listened to him describe the vision that he had for Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the things, I mean, it's unforgettable words. It was not Sermon on the Mount, but it came from him. And one of the things he said was that he was talking about that recovery process, and that it's not a hiding place, that the function of AA is restores to our place in the world. And what he said was that if we practice these principles the way they're laid out, there'll come a day when you'll be able to walk the streets of this earth and look any human you meet comfortably in the eye. Man, I was nowhere close to that. But what a promise, really. What a promise. And it was a true promise, because today I don't know of a human that I can meet and not comfortably look them in the eye. And so it was not only a wonderful experience to see the guy, it was just to be there, to feel that energy, to appreciate his intelligence, his creative, God, what a creative man. And so, yeah, and I did and value it to this day. Yeah.
Let me just add, this year I went to Stepping Stones for the first time. My sister and I went down, and I'm a big history student of AA, and I misunderstood the part in the history when they got evicted from the townhouse in Brooklyn and their furniture was put out in the street. I assumed that it had been lost. That's how I recorded it in my head when I read that. I didn't know that they got it all back, and it went to Stepping Stones. So when we went into the kitchen, and the person who was giving the tour said, "This is the table that Bill and Ebby sat at." I said, "This is? It is?" And here's this cheap old Formica white table, and I'm going, "Give me that camera. I want to be there." So I got one in my briefcase, and when I show it to non-alcoholics, they really look weird. Why I'm so excited about a table.
Now, I never went to Stepping Stones. That's only for circuit speakers. Just 1 minute. Let me tell you one other thing. You're looking for nostalgia. I'll tell you one other thing. In 85, I was invited to speak at the 50th anniversary of AA in Akron. And God knows that's a monumental occasion, a monumental experience. And my first thought was, why on earth would they invite a guy like me? I mean, hell's bells, they could get Nobel laureates, they could get scientists, celebrities, a billionaire. Why would you get some junkyard dog from North Carolina? And that's just the instinctive insecurity about it. Then I thought about it, and I said, well, why wouldn't they? Because this is not about the rich and famous and powerful and brilliant. This is about folks who have been broken and healed. So I got over it and went up, and after I spoke, we went over to Dr. Bob's house. Now, this wasn't planned by anybody. That table reminded me of it. I sat down, somebody said, would you like a sandwich? I said, yeah, let's do it. So I sat down, if you can picture this, at Dr. Bob's house with his son, Smitty, and his daughter, Sue, and me. Now, I didn't say a word, but I'll tell you what, I was about to dump with that sandwich because, boy, that was overwhelming. Yeah. Because that's where you see a vision realized, a vision come real. And so that was just a tremendously important occasion for me. Because I don't know, I'm not a hero worshiper or anything like that, but those folks that founded this program, to me, special place.
I had one other special.
Yeah.
I sat in Chuck Chamberlain's chair overlooking the Pacific Ocean.
You didn't hold Bernie on your left.
Anyway, I mean, that was like, oh my God.
And before our next question, I just want to remind everybody we have about 10 minutes. So in case there's anyone who has kind of that last, if you will, burning question for our two panelists, I want to make sure that you have time to stand up and ask that question. Please go ahead.
Hi.
Hi, Ben.
Nice to be here. Well, Thomas, thank you for your informative workshop. It was really good to be here and get the information that you gave. I did a lot of writing, so I have a lot of things to take with me. I have questions about page 9 meetings. And
What?
one of the questions is,
What kind of meetings?
when you take a meeting into an institute,
Okay.
hospitals and institutes.
Yeah, okay.
I do want to add a woman's
Right.
treatment facility. And I guess, I just wanted some information on guidelines as to, the types of meetings, you should do specific meetings, if there should be a certain focus, if you should, be trying to teach something, and if so, what, a format, or, I know you bring in speakers, but you like to try to do other things also. Basically, that's it. For that part, and then I have something else to ask.
And about different types of meetings that.
Kind of like what would be a guideline or structure to do something like that.
I tell you what, in shaping a program for a place, I mentioned about going in and meeting with the people, find out how the place works. The other thing I want to know is who's in there. Now, I don't mean personal information, but I want to know who are the folks that are in that place. How long are they going to be there? What are their circumstances? I want a picture of that population. And, I want to know how long they're going to be staying, because when you plan a program, it has to fit the environment it's going to work in. And that's why I don't like planning a program and then going trying to stick it in somewhere. The program has to be designed to meet the needs of that particular group.